All right, today is brew day. It is May 26, 2018, and I have actually gone and purchased a kit for brewing beer. I've done this before. I slacked off a little bit and then decided I was going to pursue it again. So there's some different steps that I'm taking this time in brewing my beer, and that is the water. First of all, I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas. They got some of the best water for brewing. It's got just about all the right minerals in it, and it's low in sodium. It's although it is a little bit low on calcium and magnesium, that is optimal for beer brewing. So what I've done is I've actually got, I went and got some calcium chloride, and just a little bit, and got a little bit of Epsom salt. Okay, so what I'm planning on doing, looking at the water calculator, I only need about 2 grams of the calcium chloride and only about 2 grams of the Epsom salt, which will bring my calcium and my magnesium up to the level that I need. The kit that I got is the American Amber. It's an ale, so it's going to be brewed at a low temperature, of course. Got all my ingredients, and what I did is I also checked against the instructions, made sure I had everything in my kit that I was supposed to have, and then I separated out all my ingredients by when they're going to go into the brew. And I'll show you that here now. And as you can see, I've got everything separated out by what goes in first, second, of course the hops, and then there's also an extra amount of malt that goes in at the end of the boil that I'll be adding to the wort. So I've got everything laid out, got everything ready. Another important step to me that I took before getting everything ready was I made sure that everything's clean, everything's sterilized, including the kitchen where I'm going to be cooking it. I made sure that the counters were clean, the countertops were clean, the floor's clean, everything is bleached and sterilized so that no weird germs or viruses or bacteria are floating around that could possibly get into the beer and affect the flavor or the taste. So that's, not a clean kitchen's fine. I go above and beyond and make sure everything's bleached, sterilized in the whole room to make sure everything is ready for a complete sterile boil and a complete sterile fermentation all the way through to bottling. So today I'm going to go again. I'm starting today. I've got 3 gallons of the Hot Springs water in my pot, ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and start adding my ingredients now. All right. First thing it calls for is 2 pounds of the Bryce Pale Ale Dry Malt Extract, but it's having me add it to the cold water, not the hot water, so that's what I'm doing now. Alright, second part now is to get the grains ready and get the water to 155 degrees and steep the grains for 30 minutes. So I'll get the grain bag ready now. And there's also an enzyme packet for the grains to be added as well. All right. My grains are in the bag. Now just to tie it off. Wait for the water to get to 155, and then I will immerse that for 30 minutes. All right, we're at 155 degrees. It is time to put the grain bag in. So what I'll do, slowly add it in. Bob it up and down a couple times, make sure all the grains are wet. Tie it off. All right, we'll start the timer for 30 minutes. We'll let that steep. Also, check it periodically, make sure we don't go above that 155 degree temperature. 155 exactly. All right, we'll let that go for about 30 minutes. All right, we got a little less than 2 minutes left on our 30-minute steep of our grains. So I'll be taking that out here in about a minute. And about every 5 to 10 minutes, I have been checking the temperature with my thermometer to make sure that I am staying in that 152 to 158 range, which 155 is optimal. So about 30 seconds left. Now, when taking the grains out, as tempting as it is to want to squeeze the bag or get the last drop out of the grains, that you don't want to do that because you don't want any undesirable extracts from the grains. So all we want to do is just let it drip and then remove the bag, and we're done with it. Time's up. Again, just let it drain naturally. All right. Now what we want to do is go ahead and bring the wort up to a boil. Let's get some heat going. And we're going to go ahead and get ready to add our hops. What we have, as far as the hops, is we will add the Sentinel hops at the beginning of the boil. The Sentinel hops at the beginning of the boil. And then when we're about 10 minutes from done, we're going to add Cascade and another bag of Centennial. And then after the boil is done and we remove the heat, we're going to add another Cascade and another Centennial bag of hops. All right, we're almost to a boil. It's getting there. But what I want to show you is that I try to stay organized so there's no confusion when adding ingredients or any part of the process. As you can see, it's got a time schedule for when the hops are to be added. So what I like to do, since there's 5 bags, is I like to separate them out. This will go in at the as soon as the boil starts and I start my timer. These two will go in at the 10 minutes before the boil is done, and these two will go in after I've turned off, after the boil is finished after 1 hour and I have turned the heat off. These two will be added also. So I keep them lined up so there's no confusion on which ones go in, what time they go in. Got my timer going. Instructions are laid out, so there's no step-by-step. I know exactly what order everything goes in. Another note that I want to add at this point is anytime you're adding ingredients, whether it be hops or some more malt to be added to the mixture, anytime that is at a boil, you have it has a tendency to bubble up or to foam up. And one thing you want to try to avoid is a boil over, because this is mostly, with the malt, the grain extract, it's very sugary, and if it burns onto your counter, very hard to clean up. It's just a total mess if that boils over. So when you're adding your hops, when you're adding additional malts, when your wort is at a boil stage, be very, very careful that you don't allow that to boil over. One thing you can do if it starts to do that is you can actually remove it from the heat and let that die down a little bit. Try to stir it a little bit to get the bubbles or the foam to settle back down. Some people have said, put a wood spoon across the top of it will keep it. I haven't had such luck. I've still had boilovers with a wooden spoon on top of there, so you're just going to have to keep very close watch to make sure that when you're adding these hops, you're adding these malts, these additional ingredients in the boiling stage, that it's not boiling over. So just keep a close eye on that and monitor your heat to keep that from coming over and creating a big mess. And also, one other thing I want to say at this point is, even though that I am very careful about sterilization and cleanliness whenever I'm making my beer, because you don't want any bad bacteria or bad anything from the air coming in and ruining the flavor of your beer in the later process, is at this point here with it boiling, there's not as big or as a critical watch for your sanitation, simply because anything boiling is sanitized anyway. But once you cool this down to a wort that the yeast is comfortable fermenting in, remember, the yeast is a live organism. It needs to be at a set temperature. With this being an ale or a lager, it needs to be between 62 and 66 degrees to properly ferment. Well, with that, it needs to have oxygen, which you want to agitate your wort in the bucket. We'll get to that later. To add oxygen to the wort, and it's got plenty of sugar in there for the yeast to eat. So you got the prime conditions for the yeast is also prime conditions for unwanted bacteria. So once we get it to a cool stage to where it's favorable for the yeast, that's when it's critical that we make sure that wash your hands, make sure our hands are clean. We're not breathing into our wort. We want to make sure that our utensils are sterilized and clean, favorable for keeping any germs, bacteria out of the wort. So just be real cautious of that as well. All right, we're now to boil, so it's time to add our hops and to start our timer. Again, being careful when adding our hops to prevent boil over. So if we need to pull it from the heat to let it settle down, so be it. It's better to do that than to have a big mess to have to clean up and lose part of your wort anyway. We'll let that go for about another 50 minutes, then we'll add our second set of hops. Then we'll let that go for 10 minutes. We'll shut everything down, add our third set of hops. So we'll come back to that when the boil is done. All right, we're about down to 10 minutes before the end of the boil. See about 10, 33, 32, 31. So it is about time to add our second set of hops. Again, being careful of a rollover or boil over. Just be cautious of that. So time for our second set of hops. All right, 10 more minutes to the end of our boil. All right, now we're just waiting for our timer to go off for our 1 hour boil to be complete. And then it'll be time to add my hops and some additional malt that's in this recipe. Time's up, let's get her done. All right, we're gonna remove it from the heat. Turn our heat source off. Add our remaining hops. Okay, we've added our hops. Now to get ready to add our additional malt that's in this recipe. It's actually 4 pounds of malt extract, dry malt extract that we're adding to the end of the boil. We're going to add the malt, dry malt extract. We're going to add it slowly and stirring it so that it mixes well as we go along. Also to make sure we prevent that boil over. Two more packages to go. Last one. All right, all the malt is dissolved into the wort. It recommends now that we allow it to set about 10 minutes just for final pasteurization of the malt and everything. So we'll go ahead and let it sit here for about 10 minutes and then we'll be ready to cool our wort down to fermentation temperature. All right, now it's time to chill our wort. What I like to do is I like to put it in a water bath. I put it in the sink with cold water, and then what I like to do is is just keep a steady stream of cold water running behind it. And the way my sink fortunately works out, what happens is, as that fills up, the hot water will run over the edge into the other sink, and it'll constantly be filling up with cold water on the bottom. So it just kind of takes the heat away, heat exchange, and it actually makes the heated water come out to this side and pour out, while a constant flow of cold water is going to the bottom and help chill that wort down. And then what I also, after it gets down to about room temperature, I want to go ahead and put ice in there to bring it down to the 62 to 66 degrees that this yeast ferments at. And then of course I'll be adding that to my bucket, as well as my fresh clean water to fill my bucket up to the 5-gallon line. And we'll get our yeast in and start the fermentation. But right now, we're just getting this wort chilled down to 62, 66 degrees. All right, my wort's chilled down to about 70 degrees. And what I also did to help get the wort down to 62 to 66 degrees is I put a couple of jugs of the water that I'm going to be using for fermenting into the freezer to further chill it down. I want to get a temperature of about 64 degrees. So what I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to go ahead and pull the wort out of the water bath. And I've got a, some people don't filter their wort when they put it in their fermenting bucket. I like to go ahead and I've got a filtered funnel that I use to pour the wort through into the bucket, and it helps get some of that sediment out. And for me, it kind of helps with the clarity or the clarification of the beer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pour the wort into the fermentation bucket, and then add the water up to the 5-gallon point, and then we'll be ready to add the yeast and start the fermentation process. Yes, I wash and sanitize my hands. As fine as the mesh screen is in here, it gets clogged up by the hops, so you have to clear it out to get it to strain through. And all you got left is your hops. Awesome. All right, now all we got to do is add water to it to get it up to the 5-gallon mark. And 5 gallons it is. Now Now to agitate it just a little bit more. Then I'm going to transfer it into my actual fermentation bucket, which will also add to the oxygen. There we go. Oh yeah, yeast is gonna love that. All right, check the temperature. Beautiful 64 degrees. Once I get some of this foam to subside, I'm going to check with my hydrometer and see what my reading is. So I'm just going to cover it up for now, let that settle. All right, got my hydrometer all clean, sanitized. I'm just going to check the reading. It should be about 1.054. Let's see how close we are. Actually, I'm showing a 1.06, just a little bit more sugar than what the recipe called for, but should give about a 5.6 to a 5.8% alcohol. Alcohol is always good. All right, let's pitch the yeast. I took a clean, sanitized glass and I added some wort to it and I pitched my yeast in it. I've let it set for about 10-15 minutes to get the yeast started. Now let's put it into the wort. Give that a light stir. All right, let's let the fermentation begin. All right, we got our lid on. Just put a little bit of the airlock. We're ready to go. Well, so all in all, from start to finish, it took me about 5 hours, and most of that was spent on cooling it down to the 64 degrees. But now what's left for me to do, I've got it in a, actually I've got a converted refrigerator that's set to where it stays about 62 degrees and allowing about 2 to 3 degrees temperature increase for fermentation. It should keep it about the 64, 65 degree range, which is about right where it needs to be for a good ale. So I'm gonna check back in a couple of days, make sure that the fermenting is started. And then what I'll do is let that ferment for about a good 1 to 2 weeks, and then we'll proceed to priming and bottling. So see you then. Well, it's been about a little over 30 hours, 36 hours, well, probably closer to 36 hours. And as you can see, we've got a good fermentation going. You can see the bubbling going on in the airlock. Also, the temperature is about 62 to 64 degrees, which is absolutely perfect for the ale yeast to work. So we're going to continue to let this ferment for about a week, and then off to bottling we go. All right, it is June 1st, 2018, and I've had about five good days of fermentation on the brew so far, the beer. What I've decided to do, which doesn't really call for the recipe, but I decided to do it anyways. I'm gonna go ahead and do a second fermentation on it. And what that is I'm gonna take it out of the fermentation bucket that I put it in, and I'm gonna put it into a clear carboy to let a second fermentation happen, just mainly for clarification of the beer, to kind of settle out the old yeast, any dead yeast that is settled. You know, I want to get that out, and I want to help get the beer that nice golden, clear color that instead of that, you know, milky looking when it's got, you know, residue and it's got different stuff in it. It's just to help clarify the beer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then we'll let it sit for probably another week in the second fermentation, and then we'll go into the bottling process. So we'll go ahead and do that now. All right, let's see how that looks. Oh yeah. And while I got it open, I'm gonna go ahead and do a hydrometer reading on it just to see how much fermentation is actually taking place. All right, my hydrometer is clean and sterilized, so let's take a reading. About 1.015. So I believe our original reading was 1.060. Now we're down to 1.015. So quite a bit of fermentation is taking place. Still got a little bit to go. That's why we're going to go ahead and let the second fermentation happen in the clean, sterilized carboy. Now the secret here is to prevent as much oxidation as possible. Oxygen is good in the beginning of a fermentation, but not anywhere after that. So that's why we're just going to let it slowly drain into the bottom. We don't want any, as little oxygen added to it as possible, because we don't want a off flavor to the beer. Just let it do its thing. got 5 gallons back in the carboy transferred over. Now all we got to do is seal it up and let that go for about another week. And that's what's left. Just leftover yeast, which we didn't want in the beer anyway. So, all good. One of the other things I wanted to show was how milky looking it is right now. While we got all that sediment and everything still in there, what'll happen is it will eventually, given time, all that will settle down to the bottom, the yeast and everything like that, and this will get a lot clearer and get that normal beer look to it. And then once we bottle it, it'll continue to settle in the bottle and clarify even more. And so that's actually going to be our next step. We're going to go ahead and let this go for about another week, second fermentation, and then we'll go back to bottling. See you then. All right, we are finally there. It has been a week since we started our secondary fermentation, and that is finished. Today is bottling day. We're finally going to get it put into our bottles and let that set for about 2 weeks for carbonation to build up, and it'll be ready to drink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go over the steps now of what it takes to properly bottle the beer, and then I'll show them step by step as we are doing it. So the thing that it is, we use the brown bottles. As you can see, it's recommended to have the amber or the brown colored bottles to help keep light out of the beer that causes off flavors. So we're going to use the brown bottles. And the steps, we're going to first take the priming sugar, which is corn sugar, and we're going to add that to 2 cups of water. We're going to boil that for about 5 minutes to make sure everything is clean and sanitized for the beer. And we're going to add it to our bottling bucket, which is also a fermentation bucket, which has been cleaned and sanitized. And then we're going to rack the beer over into the fermentation bucket with the sugar. We're going to add the sugar to it, the sugar water to it as well. And then when we rack that over, it'll kind of stir up and add sugar back for the yeast to consume. And what that does when you bottle the beer and cap it off, of course we know the byproducts of fermentation is of course alcohol and CO2. So the CO2 is naturally builds up in the bottle from the yeast eating the sugar and causes that carbonation for the beer. So we're going to do that now, and I'll show you step by step how that's done. So let's get her done. Also, my little Chihuahua Dazzle will be joining us today. He's my quality control. He's going to make sure that I do everything correctly and watch over it, making sure that I bottle it correctly. He just laying there. So here's our 5 gallons of beer in the carboy, which has set for a week. And as you can see, if you look, it has cleared up quite a bit. And you can see down here at the bottom, the sediment from the expended yeast that has settled down to the bottom, or to the bottom rather, and it has cleared up a lot. This is going to be my secondary, or my bottling bucket that I'm going to be using. It's been cleaned and sanitized. It's ready to go. Okay, I've already added 2 cups of water to my pan. I'm going to bring that to a boil, and then I'm going to add my priming sugar to it. So that's our first step. Also, I have my beer bottles. I use the dishwasher in the sanitize mode to actually, of course, they're pre-washed. And then what I do is I put them in the dishwasher and set my dishwasher to sanitize mode, which further cleans and sterilizes the bottles so that they're ready for the beer. So that's how I sanitize my beer bottles. The beer bottle caps, I bought those at the fermentation store where I buy all my supplies. And what I do to sanitize those is I just simply take them out. Some people like to put them in the sanitized solution, or some people want to put them in a little bit of bleach with water to sanitize them. I just get a separate pan, put water in it, boil it, put my caps in there, and let the boiling water sanitize them. That's always seemed to work for me, and it seems to be a lot easier. So that's what I do to sanitize my bottling caps. Okay, my water's at a boil. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna add the priming sugar to it. Bring that back up to a boil and let that boil for about 5 minutes. Okay, I've already got my beer primed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the sugar water to our bucket. And Dazzle's watching over the process for me. He's making sure everything is being done correctly. There he is. Good boy. Now we just add our beer to it. Some people recommend, stirring it around, make sure it's mixed, but what I've always found is just the simple process of the beer being transferred from the carboy into the bucket stirs it up enough. So you don't have to sit there and take a spoon and stir it all up, because it's going to get agitated enough, and you don't want any excess agitation or oxygen being added to your beer still at this point. So we'll just let it naturally mix with the sugar, and we'll be ready to take that and get it put in the bottles. And another point I want to make is that people wonder, is there enough yeast left to do the carbonation in the bottles? There's a bunch of live yeast left. Even though the fermentation process is finished, there's still millions of yeast cells still available to do the carbonation. So that's, unless you let it set for months, the yeast is still going to be, they might go dormant, but they're still going to be live and active once we go into the bottling process. So there's plenty of yeast left to do the carbonation. All right, we have it transferred over from our carboy into our bucket, which we mixed our sugar with. Now all we got to do is switch them out. Okay, we're ready to start bottling now. I've got my bottles separated out into a couple boxes here. And what I want to show you is this little magic wand, or this little tool right here. It's spring loaded on the bottom, so as beer, you go to the bottom of your bottle, and when you push down that lever, it lets the beer enter your bottle. And then as soon as you raise it back up, the spring loaded plunger stops the beer flow. This thing is great for filling bottles with beer. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show the process on this one bottle. of how you fill a beer bottle up. And the one thing you want to do is you want to leave about an inch of airspace in the top of your bottles. That allows for the proper carbonation, because if it's too full, it won't carbonate, won't have enough carbonation in it. And if it's too low, it's going to have way too much carbonation. So that 1 inch bottle's neck space is prime. And the nice thing about the wand also is that when you put it in there and you fill it up to the top, when you pull the wand out, you have that perfect 1 inch of airspace in the top of your bottle. So I'm gonna go ahead and show that now. Pushing down the plunger, it's filling up. Okay. And you pull that out, and you have that perfect space, airspace for your beer. So I just want to show it on the one bottle, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fill up the rest of them, and then I'll show you the capping process. All right, the process of capping is actually pretty simple. We've got our handy dandy bottle capper. So all you do, take a clean, sterilized bottle cap, place it on top. Let the capper do the rest. So all we got to do now is get the rest of these capped, and we will let them set for about 2 weeks to properly carbonate, and we'll be enjoying fresh home brewed beer. All right, they are all capped now, and as you can see, that 5 gallons made me about 47 16-ounce bottles of home brewed beer. So now all we need to do now is wait about 2 weeks for the carbonation to happen, and we'll be drinking beer. So thanks for watching.